Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library. And today I have a great guest on because, it's one thing to actually start to learn the theory of entrepreneurship, in which, is a very big thing because a lot of colleges are having entrepreneurship emphasis or entrepreneurship majors or programs. But it's always interesting to talk to those individuals when they actually get into the world and actually start really building their business. And I like to ask them, let's compare what you learn to what you're experiencing and what that's like. So I wanted to welcome Dezbee McDaniel onto the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Terrell. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. Also, we connected because I saw that you were recognized in Charlotte, NO, for the great work that you're doing with your business and being co-founder. And the business is making some great strides to really helping the country and helping the world move closer to a cure for COVID-19. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's super important work. And I'm just happy to be a part of it right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we jump into talking about, your business that you're in now, tell us a little bit about your background. Like what were you doing before starting this business?
Yeah. So before being a part of this business, I had co-founded another technology startup. And to kind of walk back through my experience. So I'm from rural North Carolina. And I went to UNC Chapel Hill after high school, and being in the entrepreneurship minor at UNC Chapel Hill was really where I began to develop my entrepreneurial mindset and then also be able to see myself as an entrepreneur and really know and understand what that looks like. So that was kind of where I began to, see myself as an entrepreneur. And so in college, I started really, I think, learning to ideate, learning to come up with creative ideas that solve problems. That I think of as a skill in itself. And that's a lot of what I developed in college is the ability to create ideas, the ability to come up with creative ideas. I feel like, a lot of what I did in college was theorize on businesses I wanted to start, thinking through the value propositions, thinking through how we would go to market, and how we would develop the market, and never actually did any of that. But I found value in flexing my brain and being able to train my brain to think in these ways. And now it's almost unconscious where I can't not think about solving problems in the world. Like I'll see a problem, I'm like, I wonder if I can develop something to solve that. And like it unconsciously happens. So that's kind of where I was in college. And then knowing that I had done a lot of theoretical entrepreneurialism is what I called it. I was like thinking about the fact that it was a lot of theory in what I was doing, but how do I translate that to practice? How do I now start building businesses? How do I take this idea and now execute on parts of it to begin developing it? Because that's a way different experience than just sitting in a room and brainstorming on this idea. It's way easy to sit and brainstorm about this large vision than it is to actually create that vision, And so I wanted to get into the execution part of it. And so once I graduated from UNC, I went into a fellowship program called Venture for America. Venture for America is, the way that I usually describe it, is similar to Teach for America, but for entrepreneurship. So they place you into early stage startups in cities like New Orleans, Baltimore, Charlotte, and lots of other cities throughout the country. And so I originally was in Baltimore and then eventually went to Charlotte. And that was where I was able to kind of get my practical experience, I would say. I was working with technology startups. I work with a company called Tech South in Charlotte. Shout out to them. I did sales for them. And throughout those different experiences, I really feel like I was proving to myself that I could actually be an entrepreneur. Like I was doing things now. I wasn't just reading about people doing things and understand, okay, if I do that, I could be an entrepreneur. I was now doing these things and showing myself that I had these skill sets and mindsets developed to a point that I could effectively carry them out. And that was really, I would say, what I was trying to do with Venture for America was prove to myself that I could do these entrepreneurial things past just theorizing about them. And so at Tech Talent South, I actually did like 140,000 in sales in 3 months. And so for me, I was like, I just did 6 figures in sales in 3 months. Like 90K of that was in 1 month. And so at that point, I was like, from my perspective, you know, sales, the skills of sales is what you need to be an entrepreneur. Like you're going to sell your vision. You know, you might be selling that to a co-founder. You might be selling that to investors. You might be selling that to your first hire, but they all have to believe in what you're giving them. And that is selling them. So for me, I knew that sales was one of the most important skills I needed to develop. And that experience at Tech Talent South has shown me that I had proven I was good at this. I had this skill set developed to a certain point that I felt I could venture out on my own. And so that's what I did. It was probably in the middle of my Venture for America fellowship. I had just gotten laid off from Tech Talent South. We did coding boot camps, and I was on the B2C sales team, and we were switching our strategy to be more of B2B, to focus on selling our services to corporates, to corporations. And so as we were shifting our strategy, we were shifting our outreach efforts from B2C to B2B. So we were cutting down our B2C sales team, and I was part of that process. And so they let me go, but I had already started thinking on an idea. And while I was there, I mean, I had been toying with the idea. I talked to the CEO of the company about the idea, and really just kind of trying to see how they received the idea, as far as my ability to pitch it. And then if they actually thought it was viable or feasible or not. Like, I respected their opinions. And so that actually meant something to me. But once that was done, I mean, I was talking to the people in the company as I knew I was getting laid off about starting my own business. And, you know, some of them didn't necessarily like think that was the best move for me at my stage of my career and all of that. That was one thing that I just had to know myself. I had to know myself. I had to know how comfortable I was making this move. I had to know, you know, whether I was able to actually carry out this business, whether other people thought I could or could not. You know, I had to be sure enough of myself to be able to take the dissenting opinions and make sense of all of that information. And for me, it felt like the right move. Really, for me, I'm a feeling person, and it felt right, you know? I did a lot of evaluation, a lot of pondering, but it just felt right. Throughout the whole time that I was evaluating, I looked at pros, cons, like it always just felt like the right move. And so I went with it. And throughout that business, it ultimately failed. I raised some funds and was able to do some research and gain some insights. Had a few beta customers, you know, no paid customers. Struck a few big partnerships, I would say, but ultimately we weren't able to commercialize the solution. And then also for myself and my founder, it was really a decision that we were giving up too much personally to keep pursuing this business. And so it got to where pursuing the business meant that we were doing harm to our personal lives. And that wasn't something that we wanted to continue to do. We were doing that for some time, myself and my co-founder, but we didn't feel like it was worth continuing to do that. And honestly, we shut down the business right before the COVID-19 kind of shutdown started happening. So really, it was a blessing in disguise, because that would have killed our business anyway. I mean, ours was based around Uber and Lyft and travel. And I mean, travel has pretty much come to a halt. So we literally would not have been able to continue with our business. And so it's kind of a blessing in disguise. And to get to where I am today, so from Everywhere Ad, I started consulting with founders that I had been working with through Everywhere Ad, or been in accelerators or incubators with. I would talk to them, and we would, you know, go back and forth about the problems we're experiencing in our business. And a lot of what other founders would come to me would be about their marketing or their sales process. And I would talk to them about that, about how to improve that, just on like some relational type of dialogue. You know, you're a founder, I'm a founder, I'm experiencing these problems. You have this background, you can help me here. I have this background, I can help you here. And then it happened that a few of them just kind of wanted to hire me for my services, like as an individual, while my company Everywhere Ad couldn't help them. Like, they knew that the marketing ideas I was generating as we talked, if they paid me for that, I could help in their business. And so I started consulting kind of part-time as I was running Everywhere Ad. once I stopped running everywhere ad or shut that down, I started consulting full time. I went to a few companies that I had come across, a few founders I had come across, and let them know I wasn't running an everywhere ad anymore. They immediately, again, wanted to work with me. You know, I feel like they had, we had built a relationship where they were able to get value from me. I get value from them, just normal conversation. And when they saw that I was available, my services were available, they wanted to hire me for that. So I kind of did that for a while. And my particular intention with that was me learning and filling out what I wanted my next opportunity to be. So I wanted to work with companies to continue to learn about their infrastructure, their strategies, their goals, and how they're achieving those, so that that could inform my next experience, so that I could be able to refer to all of that and have it give me insight to how I should do my own strategies and goal setting and reaching and all of that. And then also, it really just gives me the ability to continue to learn about other industries, learn about, you know, different founders and just how they personally relate to their business. I mean, really, it was just a learning tool that was able to also generate cash flow. And I was also able to contribute to other businesses at the same time as doing those other two things. And what happened was CliniSpan Health was actually one of my clients that I was consulting with. And so I was consulting with CliniSpan Health and the founder for about a year. And throughout that whole time, we worked probably on a handful of projects. And they all, I would say, went really well, made great progress. I brought a lot of value to the business. And eventually the original founder asked me to be a co-founder with them and really just be more involved in the business. And it really made sense for me for 3 reasons. Number one, it's actually very similar to Everywhere Ad as far as the business model. It's like a B2B to C model. It's basically a marketing technology that you work with an influencer in the model to help communicate and create awareness about a particular concept to a unreachable group of people who are now reachable through this model, if that makes sense. That's kind of how Everywhere Ad works. You know, we work with Uber drivers to put tablets on the back of their seats to have those tablets communicate to passengers as consumers about local businesses. In CliniSpan Health, we work with pharma companies and CROs to communicate their studies through nonprofits' email lists. So they're so similar business models that some of the problems I was attacking in Everywhere Ad are helping me attack problems in CliniSpan Health a lot easier. I have a lot more education and knowledge on how to attack some of these things because I was literally attacking the same concepts in another business. So that was number one. There's so much synergy in the models that I was like, yes, I can create value here because I was just creating value in a similar system. The second thing was the higher impact. Honestly, for me, you know, helping small businesses market better is important work. But for me, helping more Black and brown people get enrolled in clinical trials so that drugs then have better efficacy and affect us in a better manner, to me, is just much more impactful work. My heart and my head can really be much more behind that than, you know, helping small businesses improve marketing. Like I said, those are both impactful areas, but you know, the area that I'm working in now is just much more impactful in my mind. And I feel like I get up every day, like more passionate about this problem. So that was another thing that was very important to me, is that I really feel more invested into this problem because I feel like it actually helps the world in a much better way, you know, a much more impactful way. And then the third thing was just the relationship I had with the founder. We have very high trust. We are very similar and very different in some stark ways. But we work really like very well together. And there's just a lot of synergy between us two as individuals. And that was the third thing that really made me feel like it made sense for me to be a part of this business. Like, I feel like he's a person that I have a lot of respect for, that I feel like I can learn a lot from. I'm very big on being able to learn from my partners. You know, I want to be able to learn from him and pick up things that, you know, I would not have been able to pick up otherwise. So that was like the third thing that really made it feel like it made sense for me to give more of myself to CliniSpan Health. And when I decided to do that, I started giving less, consulting less. So now I'm spending more of my time, more as a co-founder with CliniSpan Health and less as a consultant, who has multiple clients. Like a couple of my clients, I literally don't work with them anymore at all. And then a couple of them, I just kind of shrunk the scope of work. So, we might have had X number of projects we were working on, might cut it down and also cut the timelines. And so I just kind of like shrunk myself in other areas as far as consulting goes so that I could focus more on CliniSpan Health and really be able to give, invest in the company a way that a co-founder would need to. So that's kind of how I got to CliniSpan Health. It's a confusing journey, even from my own perspective. So it's really always confusing for me to talk about, honestly, because I feel like it's so much happening that led to that one thing. It's kind of hard to explain in like a sequential manner.
Mm-hmm. No, that I completely understand. I mean, there's so many elements of different stages of your journey that without understanding the context of those, you don't fully understand, where you are now. And, I want to go back to a couple of those things. One of the things you talked about was, the business that when you left the first sales role and you went into starting a business and that business didn't pan out and you guys ended up closing it down. I mean, a lot of things go on with that. I mean, to where the theory or the technical side of that can be understood. I mean, for you as a entrepreneur, what were you going through personally with coming to that decision? Like, how did that process go?
That was a great question, man. And it was not easy to firstly answer that. It was not easy. It was very much an internal process that had to be done before that decision was even made. And then once that decision was made, there was another internal process that had to be done to cope with that decision being a reality. So I feel like a lot of what I did, as far as just thinking through it, is like thinking through, where do I go from here? If I do shut this down, really thinking about all the people that I got involved in the business from a leadership perspective. That was the first thing. Is like, I got my co-founder. My co-founder was planning on going to dental school. Like, he stopped dental school and all of that to work on this business. I'd gotten money invested in the business. So I had to think about what conversation I'm going to have with the investors, So really that's where my head was first. It wasn't even necessarily where do I even go from here, but where do the people that I brought into this, where do they go from here? Like, how do I help them come out on the other side of this decision feeling like it was the right decision for them? Like my co-founder, for example, like I was thinking a lot about, wow, I really had him not going to dental school so that he can help me with this business. Like, how do I show him that there is value in having done this, that it did make sense for him? Like, or did it? I had to even understand if it did from my own perspective. So that was a lot of the internal kind of dialogue, I guess I would call it, is really just the people that I brought into this. How do I make a soft landing for them? How do I make a soft landing for them now that we aren't experiencing this grand vision that I sold them on and we're flailing? I had to man up and attack that. Honestly, that was really, one of the biggest points of growth in my career as an entrepreneur. Really, shutting down my first business, my first real business, shutting that down was where I was able to grow the most because of these hard conversations and because, I had gotten people invested in some form of fashion and now telling them that their investment was ultimately going nowhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had to do all of that before making the decision. Once I made the decision, it was kind of just like, honestly, carrying all of that out, having the conversations with my investors, having a conversation with my co-founder, and really, again, just preparing myself for that. It took an emotional toll. It really took an emotional toll. So yeah, that really was a struggle.
Gotcha.
Ultimately, it was a struggle, but once it was done, I appreciated it. Like I said, I appreciated it because I grew the most from that. And I mean, you have to go into these things knowing that can be your reality. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like it was always in the back of my mind that could be a reality. I didn't try to think about it too much because I feel like kind of overthinking about it is kind of you maybe almost manifesting it. So I don't like to over think about it, but I thought about it a bit, knowing like, okay, if this happens, like I have to be okay with that. I have to be ready to deal with that. And so I was, but it was, again, in theory and practice, it was way different. You know, actually coming to face that reality was way different than me walking through that scenario in my head.
Gotcha.
But like I said, ultimately, I dealt with it all. I had the conversations. They were hard conversations, but they were had. I would say I came out on the other side of all those relationships with them being stronger. You know, all of those relationships with my co-founder, my investors, like they're all still strong relationships. They're all still people that I could be involved with in business today. And so that's why I say, like I said, it was really the greatest tool for me to learn, honestly, because if I ever have to handle something like that again, I feel like it'll be a lot easier. And then also in my mind, that's kind of the worst of all situations in business. So I feel like I can't maybe go below that, you know, in my mind, as far as having to deal with, you know, mental and emotional turmoil. So yeah, that was a great experience, even though, you know, no one wants to have to close a business.
So now I want to ask you about, you know, another kind of, I guess you could say, pivotal moment of, you know, going through that experience of, you know, getting to a point where, you know, you saw the potential of what that could have been, and then having to come to that realization that this wasn't going to work out, closing that business down. And now in the current business, it's, you know, you got to pull back that excitement and that possibility. Like, what was that like, you know, going from knowing in the back of your mind there was a business that didn't work out, now I have to go become a champion of this new business, and being able to get past the failed business to now being able to see new possibility in this new opportunity?
Yep. Really, my real thought on that from my perspective is that I have a long-term view on things. Like, honestly, having a long-term view on things makes me feel a lot better about short-term happenings. You know, knowing that I have a long career and journey ahead of me, knowing that there will be many a business that I build, many that will fail, many that will be successful. Kind of having those things in my mind kind of makes me feel okay. You know, it makes me feel like I'm committed to this. Ultimately, is I feel like the real thing is knowing that in the long term, that's who I want to be. I have to continue to act that way in the short term for me to manifest that long-term person. So, you know, if I want to have a long entrepreneurial career, I have to stick to it when it's hard. You know, I have to keep going even when I don't see anything on the other side. And so that's been a lot of it, is just knowing that I'm committed to this for the long term, because I have long-term goals that require these short-term struggles. Honestly, that's what really keeps me in a space to continue to be excited and continue to contribute value in this way. Like, that's really, I feel like, for me. And I feel like that's something I talk about with a lot of entrepreneurs, is really how you keep yourself motivated and inspired and keeping yourself enthused from failure to failure, you know, kind of as Ben Franklin put it. I feel like, yeah, for me, it's knowing that I have long-term goals that are more important to me than my short-term struggles, in a few words.
Gotcha. Yep. No, I think that sounds incredible. I mean, so now tell us a little bit about, and, you know, a little bit more on the actual product or service that the current business offers, so people can understand that a little more.
Yep. So CliniSpan Health is a software platform that is accelerating and diversifying clinical trial recruitment. So the way that the model works is, if you are a nonprofit, you could partner with CliniSpan Health to have CliniSpan Health emailing clinical studies to your supporters, which will educate them and then eventually help them feel more comfortable getting enrolled in the clinical trials. And if you were an individual who wanted to enroll in clinical trials, you could also do that through our site. So if you were to go to CliniSpanHealth.com, you could potentially enroll in a COVID-19 study and walk through the beginning of the process on the site. And ultimately, the goal of what CliniSpan Health is trying to do, though, is get more Black and brown people like ourselves involved in clinical trials. The huge implications of us not being involved is that when we go to Walgreens and CVS and we take, ibuprofen or any of these other pharmaceutical drugs, we take in proper dosage, and then we also see inadvertent side effects because we aren't involved in this drug development process, right? So they mostly study middle-aged white men because that's who is involved in the clinical trials. And so when middle-aged white men take that ibuprofen, it affects them more efficiently than it would affect you or myself. Mm-hmm. And so that really is a huge issue. Like, we need to be able to take drugs that affect us in a particular way. And we need to be able to know how particular that effect is. And so we aren't able to do that right now because people like you and I aren't, number one, we don't know as much about clinical trials and what they even are. And then two, we don't have as much access to clinical trials and the information and the sites. So really what we're trying to do is up those educational resources and promote those on channels and in ways that will resonate with people that look like you and myself. And then also make them feel more comfortable because there's a high level of distrust in the healthcare system based on ways we've been treated in the past. So that's really the difficult thing for CliniSpan Health to overcome and really show people that they can have a higher trust in the healthcare system because of the changes that have been made since those, kind of points of bad treatment. So that really, I think, is like the hardest part of our work is bringing back the trust, in the healthcare system and its ability to create a higher quality of life for people that look like ourselves. Gotcha. Because they've at many different points, shown that they can't necessarily be trusted. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like, that's kind of the hardest point of our work right now is really trying to instill trust in the healthcare system for Black and brown people.
Gotcha. And I think that's a really good point. I remember when I was living in the suburbs of Chicago, and one of the companies I was working with, we brought in a health team, and it was, all Black health team where the Black medical doctor, it was a nutritionist, and it was a physical therapist. And they were teaming up and they were talking about, specialized treatment plans. Because one of the things that they were talking about that I remember very clearly, the, physical therapist was saying, when it comes down to like, if you get on a treadmill and you see like those target heart rates that are listed there and the ages, one of the questions you should ask yourself is, who is that based on? Is that based on someone with my genetics, someone with my background? Because the best treatment that you're going to ever get would be something that's been tested with someone who fits a similar background to you. So I think what you guys are doing is great. And so how can people find you online or find you on social media to see what's going on and to see what updates you guys have?
Yep. So CliniSpanHealth.com is probably the main way that you can do that. We do have a Twitter page and a LinkedIn page that's just CliniSpan Health. And so our social media and mainly the website, I feel like the website would be where you would see probably live updates. And then also if you were interested in learning more about trials, or if you actually wanted to be, start the screening process for a trial, you could go to our website and that would get you everything you need to know.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one question that I like to ask every guest that comes on, when you think about your journey and, where you've been, what's 2 pieces of advice that you would share with other entrepreneurs?
Yep. So my pieces I've kind of talked about as it relates to myself. I feel like number one is know who you are, know your personal brand before you build a brand or a business, because your brand or your business will be an extension of you. So if you don't know who you are, if you don't understand who you are, if you don't know your values and principles and what guides you, it makes it harder to build a brand extension of something you don't understand. So try to understand yourself first, understand your values, principles, what guides you, and then build a business, because then it'll be way easier to build a brand that aligns with who you are personally. My second one kind of relates to that, is know as best as you can what it'll actually take to hit the goals that you set for yourself. So again, we talked a lot about theory and practice. In theory, things were a lot different than they were in practice. So one thing that what I call it, I guess, is expectation setting, leveling expectations, really. So if you level your expectations on what it actually takes to get to this goal by talking to someone who's gotten to that goal before or reading about it, for example, just do your research maybe on if you wanted to build $100 million company, like maybe you should read up on $100 million companies and what they've done, how long it took them, all of that. Talk to someone who's maybe built $100 million company. Maybe that's not in your network. Maybe it is. But, if you never even conjured a thought and try, you definitely can't do it if you don't even think about doing it. So just level your expectations first. And if you have this goal, try to talk to someone who's reached that goal or someone who's tried to reach that goal and see what they've done and how they can kind of give you insights into how to do that better and more efficiently and more effectively moving forward. So yeah, really know what you're getting yourself into before you get into it. And know whether or not you're willing to do what it takes to get to the goal. Because sometimes you might find that what it takes to actually get to that goal is not something you're willing to do. And that's important work to do as well. So, really do the personal development work. Ultimately, I think both of my pieces of advice are based in personal development. Really do the work to develop yourself personally before you build a business brand. Because if you don't know yourself personally, it makes it harder to know what values and principles will guide your business brand.
Gotcha. Well, Dezbee, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story, your insight, your wisdom. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Of course, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.